Welcome to Driven to Lead. I'm your host, Wayne Brandon. In this series, we explore the real world stories of key executives to find the leadership lessons that help move us all forward. If you like these conversations, we'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe and like button. It'll help us out a lot. But now we got another great program for you today, so let's make it happen. I'm excited today to have Richard Culberson on the program. Richard's a PE-backed executive, CEO, running companies, standing up companies, scaling businesses for the last 25 years. Richard is someone who can kind of give us a little bit of insights into the PE world and all of the things that are so important in that kind of investment and that kind of potential. So, Richard, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Wayne.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Now, where are you based?
I'm in Atlanta. So speaking from if you know the area, I'm in Oregon.
Yeah, great. Listen, we have a lot of business executives on the program. We're talking about various sectors, various activities, but we haven't had someone with kind of PE or VC kind of focus. So maybe you can give us some background on, what private equity companies look for, what are you trying to do? How does it kind of the business model work, and what do venture capitalists do that's a little bit different than that, and maybe even an angel investor as well, kind of, so we can understand the waterfront. Would you do that for us? Because I think we have a lot of people on the program who could use some clarification on that.
Sure, it's a journey, it's a learning environment because that's something I went through myself. So if you kind of look at my background, I've kind of gone through three phases in my professional career, if you will. First decade was as a consultant, as a technology and then a strategy consultant, and then being able to advise other businesses, largely large corporate entities, telecom, media, high tech, advising them on how they can grow their businesses. So as a consultant, and as I like to say now, quickly became a reformed consultant and moving into more in an operator space. So I worked with Cox Enterprises for about a decade, both initially for corporate strategy, but then saw an opportunity that this is a great business, great company, great people and assets. How do we add on new businesses there? So that's when I first got this idea of how do you take and commercialize new businesses, especially off of the back of existing assets. So for example, Cox Communications is a fantastic family, privately held company. It's well known for serving 22 markets broadband. Well, we also said, well, what else could we do for them? So we stood up a home health business, a home security business, that we then pivoted into kind of a smart home business to try to be a little bit more forward looking, and grew that very successfully. We'll probably talk a little about on the leadership side. I had a great leader that I followed from there into Gap Inc., where we also did something very similar there. They wanted to go into recurring revenue businesses. So we took there and said, well, wait a minute, you've got this great supply chain and distribution assets. What do you do with that remnant inventory? What do you do with the excess capacity you have? So we stood up a business on that front, as well as saying, well, wait a minute, if we make great garments and everybody knows and loves the brands, why don't we do that for businesses? So we created a uniform business and scaled that up very quickly as well. Yeah. I went from there, and I was always in that corporate environment, but kind of when I want to look at it, was like how I saw myself as a change agent ultimately. How do you grow something? The word's overused these days, we use transformation, be able to say, all right, operationally or financially, how do you look at a business and get it to where you want it to be? And that's where I really got into private equity. And for the past 3 years, I've been running what you'll hear me reference as a private equity backed portfolio company, which means that a private equity firm has invested their money to help a business grow. So I've been running that for the past 3 years. It's in the business services space. We do telephone answering. So basically what that is think about yourself if you're a plumber, an electrician, or home services, as well as a law firm, property management, or healthcare, answering the phone calls outsourced on their behalf.
Sure. Yeah.
So we've been scaling that both organically, adding new clients, keeping clients, and monetizing a little bit cleaner, as well as we've been adding on companies to get more scale for the company. So adding other founder-led companies, which I think we'll probably talk about a little bit later as well, of what that process looks like in a highly fragmented industry to say, let's roll up 2 or 3 of these companies to make a bigger, more scaled business so we can help more clients at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a key piece of the puzzle, isn't it? To look for the opportunities where you have assets, leadership talent, systems, processes that could be applied in one sector or another related sector or even a different area. And then if you're going to be an investor, whether it's private equity or another form of investing, you want to bring something incremental to the game, right? So that when you acquire a company, you're going to be able to provide some synergy, some direction, some tools that are going to help that company succeed and grow. And the whole idea, everybody moves ahead. The rising tide raises all the boats, and everybody wins in that scenario. So I think it's a fascinating area to be involved with. And the company that you've been most recently involved in, as you said, had some great benefit from that sort of play. Tell me about another company or companies that you were involved in standing up as well. I mean, you talked some about some of the ones at Cox. That was an interesting dynamic. Was there something else that kind of you remember that was really a great experience?
I think one of the things is just, I think it's amazing when you start looking around, what are the opportunities? So in private equity, you hear the term thrown around a lot of value creation. So how do you look at what tools, what assets, what people you have, and then be able to say, how can you either make more revenue off of that, help reduce your cost, or further benefit a client so you can have stickier relationships to ultimately lead to a better and bigger business? One of the examples when we were at Cox, for example, was we started a home security company. So that's typically, you see the commercial, the ADTs of the world, the Ving Rhames of a big, strong guy promoting this and like, how do you protect your home because someone's going to try to break into your house? We really tried to do two things. And I think this is a really proud moment of looking at what the opportunities were. When you really look at what home security was doing, people were looking for peace of mind. A lot of the time, people won't even arm it. They just want to know that if my kids are home alone or if there's something valuable or leaving, the value proposition you're really pushing is to be able to say, I will bring peace of mind in your home, that you have confidence that you're safe and that people you love are safe, as well as your possessions, obviously. So we really changed our branding and our positioning all around that,
Yeah.
which landed well with the broader brand that we have within Cox, a
Mhm.
warmer touch and a warmer feel. So I think we really changed the industry on the way that was positioned. But the second piece, and this is where we're talking about value creation, what we
Mhm.
saw, and this is about a decade ago, we really started building around 2012, 2014. We saw an opportunity to say, well, this monitored security, about 20% of households, 25% of households value and want and sign up for a home security business.
Mhm.
However, right around that time, home automation was starting to get big. So
Mhm.
the analogy that we always had was people would talk about home automation and it felt like a speakeasy. So you hear about it, you know it's somewhere, but you don't know how to get in, you don't know what it's like. So the way we talked about internally really often was to say, how do we open the door for the mass market to get more access to that? So
Mhm.
since we already had an existing relationship with clients through their broadband service,
Mhm.
so wait a minute, for slightly more per month on a service basis, we can provide you with a couple of devices, a door
Mhm.
window sensor, a camera to help you walk
Mhm.
into that speakeasy and get to know it in a very inexpensive way. What that did was
Yeah.
fundamentally, we turned that market from being about 20% of households passed to about 50 to 60% were interested in home automation, had no idea how to get into it. So that's when we went from growing the business. I think we had ultimately had 50 to about 100,000 subscribers. We doubled and tripled that number eventually by introducing home automation.
Yeah, I'm not surprised because one of the things about that space is that there's a number of different device suppliers, we'll say. And one of the fears is that if you're going to do a home automation solution, you want everything to talk to everything else and to be integrated into a unified solution, right? So I think bringing it from a trusted supplier where you're already in the house, you're already leveraging the broadband capabilities, you have the connectivity, and then you're adding devices to a system you already have makes so much more sense from a consumer standpoint to me than it does buying all these devices and then trying to figure out how to make them all work together, right? So yeah, good on you. That's a great
That
solution.
peace of mind, it's the
Yeah,
simplicity we were talking about of I don't want to have to worry about this. So you
yeah,
don't have to
exactly.
worry about which throat to choke when something goes wrong. If something breaks, you need help installing it. We took that pressure and that friction out of the system.
Yeah, good for you. Let's turn to the discussion a little bit to you, Richard. I have a lot of executives who are on the program, and they've kind of been pigeonholed almost into one very interesting and very dynamic, career, but they're in a particular category, and it could be maybe insulation products for vehicles, or it could be windmills, or it could be, water solutions for people. And I asked them, did you always think you wanted to be in that business? Did you kind of grow up thinking that? And they say no. In fact, they either didn't know or they kind of fell into it through a series of circumstances and people they met. Tell me about what your kind of aspirations were when you were younger. What did you think you were going to be when you grew up? Because now it seems like the world's still your oyster. You can you've done a lot of things. You can do a lot more things, and it seems like you have perhaps a few other exciting things on the horizon. How did this all evolve? I mean, how did you become this kind of generalist who solves problems and creates solutions and adds value? Doesn't really matter as much what the product or the service is.
Sure. I think there's a couple of things I was trained in. So as being in undergraduate school, I was an electrical engineer. So you just look at a problem and the curiosity, kind of intellectual curiosity of, I want to understand more about how that works, which is the same reason I went back to business school. Like I really didn't understand finance at the time. So I want to get deeper into that and like, how does this work? So I think intellectual curiosity plays a lot into that. And wanting to know how things work, why things work, wanting to find it, and just seeing a problem that someone has experienced and think, how can you help them get a little bit better on that? I think how I've been successful, when I've been successful though, I guess I'll use a sports analogy of the pivot foot. I think you always have to remember like what you bring into the relationship or the opportunity, and then what you want to learn. So I love, because I know I'm at my best when I'm like, okay, I know I'm bringing in. So for example, the theme that has been all the businesses that have scaled up are recurring revenue services business. So all the way through that client journey, how they learn about the product, how they buy it, how it's installed, how they use it, how they pay for it, and ultimately how you support it on the back end. Throughout that client journey, I'm very familiar with the way that you create value on that of, okay, we can look at where the opportunities are and help screwing off the back of that.
Right.
So that's kind of the theme I've built off of. But I think I get the most kind of the energy and draw from, or what am I learning from at the same time? And then finding the right people to surround yourself with that can help build that out in you. And then you can kind of jointly grow on the backside of that.
Yeah. So turning the kind of attention to the global economy now, what's going on in the world, what do you think the big hurdles may be, or what are the things you're watching out for as you kind of think about, what you'll get engaged in next and kind of what will be on the horizon? We have to all kind of make sure we're ready for it.
I think probably the cleanest way to answer is that there's just a whole lot of change right now. Every day you wake up, you read the journal, you read something else, and you say like, well, what is it today? Is it tariffs? Is it AI? Some geopolitical pressure that's coming from one place or another. I think we all have to be very comfortable with change. And I think that's something that you have to have. It's not natural. I think it's not a very human nature to be able to all of a sudden like, well, how do I react to that? I think you have to be able to be adaptable and be ready to change. I am fascinated with AI. I think everybody has to get a little bit smarter about what that means, and what that means for their business. So, for example, the last business was running, we recently introduced an AI agent. So, in servicing small businesses, for example, so let's say, again, with the same analogy of, let's say you're an electrician. Well, if you want one of your customers call in, if you're comfortable with and you want an AI agent to be able to help them, interesting, technology actually works. The technology works great. It's just about the interaction with the customer. And do they have the competence for it, the competence and the capability and the willingness to deal with it? You're probably the same as I am. I press zero as soon as I call in, like 00000, get me through.
People are yelling agent these days, and they're not asking for an AI agent. So
that's you've got to meet that need. So what we've been doing is pivoting to a hybrid model. So if you're comfortable as a business, if you want a human, like absolutely, we want a person to answer your phone. That's what the business has grown on, do a tremendous job doing. But also saying, well, wait a minute, if you want an AI agent up front, well, if you sense profanity, frustration, a sales lead. So some of the sales leads that we had are worth about $40,000 a call. You want to get that to a person who's going to treat that right quickly. So we went to the market and said, let's do a hybrid model that offers kind of the best of both worlds. So that's just kind of an example of, it's easy to get hung up on what the next technology is, but people move at a different cadence. So the cadence of technology and the cadence of people, I think that's going to create a lot of opportunity ultimately.
Yeah, I think you're right. And certainly as a leader, you need to be really forward looking with respect to change and making sure you're comfortable with it yourself, because the companies that don't move at the pace of technology or at the pace of the integration of a lot of these different capabilities is going to be someone who's going to be always falling behind. Their company's going to be falling behind. It takes a lot of enthusiasm and inspirational words and actions to guide a team to into a period of change. And I think you called it right. Maybe the change itself will be one of the biggest hurdles we need to deal with as time moves forward, because things are changing exponentially. I just read the other day about how fast we're duplicating, the entire data knowledge base of the world that we created up to, from the last 4 or 5 thousand years, and now we're doubling it every month or so. Or it's just a scary pace to which I know we're going to have to reinvent ourselves if we're going to keep pace in that world. So
Sure.
good
And
call.
it's readily accessible. I mean, that's when the internet came out. That's one of those things at first said, oh, wait, now you can find things on the internet. And now with the interaction and what you have at your fingertips to not only pull the data, but to start assess it, I think it's fascinating, and being able to just play. I try to once or twice a day, just kind of learn a little bit and play with it a bit. Because if you think you know what the future holds, you're probably wrong. So it's just more about the flexibility and adaptability ultimately.
Well, Richard, it's great. We've already talked a little bit about the importance of leadership as we kind of tackle the world ahead of us. But this program is about hearing some key stories from key executives like yourself, who has had a lot of different experiences. There's been a lot of stories that you could tell us, I'm sure, about failures, about wins, about transformations. But pick a story that you think might have some leadership lessons inside of it. Set it up for us. Tell us, what the background, the context is, and tell us the story, and let's talk about it.
Sure. Um, let's see. Probably one of the biggest thing that the example and the wins have said. If you talk about private equity, so M&A comes up quite often. People think of it as very transactional business. And it's fascinating once you get involved. And I'll speak specifically on lower middle market. So typically in those environments, what you're doing is
And
you're
when you say M&A when you say M&A, for the people who don't understand, it's the merger and acquisition space we're talking about, right?
exactly. And to be really clean,
So
the joke is there
companies
are no
coming
mergers. There's just
companies
acquisitions.
coming together in some way, one buying the other, or deciding to work together. However, okay.
Exactly. And there's lots of different forms that can take and how a relationship
Mhm.
comes together. But ultimately, you're bringing together a couple of business, or a new investor is coming into that business.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, it is just fascinating because I think what people don't often appreciate is just how much of that is relationship based.
Mhm.
And between how you find the deal, how you build the relationship, and how you work through that. An example, when we went to, I'll go back to that home security example from earlier. We were debating, do we want to enter the market organically, meaning create a product, start it, build it from scratch, and kind of build it up, which is a slower strategy, but ultimately you control all the aspects of it. So it's controlled, but tends to be slower. We also looked at another opportunity, like, do we want to acquire a business? So acquire an existing home security business. Benefit of that is you move a lot faster. They have an existing customer base, existing capabilities and skills, but it might not perfectly align with your business and how those come together.
Right.
Um, but sticking on the relationship front, the fascinating piece on that is this is my first exposure into M&A, and talking and working with a founder. Um, but it is a truly different relationship when you're sitting on the other side of a table talking with a founder who has grown this business for 20 years, 30 years. It's their baby. So one of the big things that we did was sitting down, and I didn't appreciate it kind of at the time, was, you start talking financials, you start talking about their customer base. And if you don't really, the lesson learned that I took away from it was sit there and just tell them you want to hear about his journey or her journey, about how they created it, what they think is so special about it. It's it's such a personal transaction versus a true financial interaction. And I think, and ultimately, we not really core part of the story is we ended up taking the organic path instead of buying the company. But I watched this founder go through his entire journey. Absolutely not interested. Wait a minute, there's money on my table. My kids don't want to be in the business, so maybe I'll get out of there. To pure readiness to step away from this business he's led for 20 to 30 years. And then ultimately not, you just see that full emotional gamut. So I brought that as I moved into private equity, where you have a lot more transactions. So typically you'll make an initial larger acquisition, which is called a platform. And then you'll do add-on acquisitions, so smaller businesses that would benefit from the larger platform. So all of those add-ons are largely for us have been founder-led businesses. And that's where I try to bring some of those learnings I had previously earlier on of saying, understand the person first. And I think ultimately that helps you win deals because there's a lot of people competing for these same businesses. But to come in and show that you have respect for their business, what it took to grow it, and that you see the opportunity in it, but also being really transparent that things will change. With a new investor, with an acquisition, you're not promising making some untrue. You have to be very ethical about this, but show respect for the business. And it goes much better. You, in private equity terms, your close rate will go up. The multiples that you have to pay for the business or how much you have to pay for it can actually come down because they see mutual alignment and will take care of that. And they'll move faster on that versus someone who they think is just coming in, taking money and might run their business into the ground.
Yeah, because they're going to see, genuine stewardship there, and that kind of continues to, propagate their legacy and what they feel is important in their business.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really good story because, whether we're selling something or we're, working strategically across a leadership team, relationships are really at the heart of everything we're going to do between people, right? And I think, as you put it, expressing mutual human respect toward someone and their business, to listen to their journey, taking the time to understand why they got to the point they got to and how they got there, and showing some care and concern and respect for that is a key piece of, really trying to come together in some sort of a deal. Not that you're doing that for the purpose of trying to drive the price down, but you're really just saying, okay, this is a real person who's put significant effort into it. They've got real world problems. Maybe they feel their problem is their kids aren't interested in this great business that
You'll
they put
learn
up.
so much more about the business too. And the
Yeah.
business is better off. It just, everyone wins when you actually sit down and look at it that way versus a purely transactional relationship.
Right. So, from your point of view, is there any downside to taking the time to get to know the person, really showing sincere interest? Like you say, you learn more about their business. You potentially put together a relationship that could form into a deal that you could put together. Is there any downside to it? Is there anything that, some PE companies kind of just run past that stage because they're just too busy, or and maybe they're not doing it intentionally, they're just on a mission and they forget how important building relationships are?
I think it's natural for all of us. I think there's a ton of pressure. So if you look at the environment right now, there's so much, try not to use analogies, but there's so much money on the sidelines. So the good news is, whether you're talking about venture capital, you're talking about private equity, there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
money available. But
Mm-hmm.
the amount deal flow, finding good deals, finding good businesses, establishing good relationships is actually what slows that process down a lot. Because if you're looking at the role of private equity is to have very strong returns on these businesses. So moving quickly, I'm sure getting to build those personal relationships, it can slow the process down a bit. I have personally found that it's always had a very positive return on that. And I've seen very little downside from it. I think you always take away a nugget, not only from, all right, well, how does this acquisition work, but you learn
Yeah.
something about business. These people have been growing their businesses for 20 to 30 years. They know more
Right.
than I will ever know about this business. So having that relationship, and even you can pick up the phone 6 months later, a year later, even if they're no longer part of the
Mhm.
business, and you can build on that relationship. And there's always something there that you might not have known, or someone else in them, especially smaller
Right.
businesses. You've got data and information that never really works. It's all the way through. I've always seen that as a positive.
Yeah. I think it is as well. I appreciate that point of view. You know, the other thing I was thinking about, just going back to some of the comments you made earlier about the fact that we live in a world of tremendous change right now. The deal flow, as you call it, or the, just for the audience might not know the term deal flow, the number of companies that are available to acquire or available to invest in would represent the number of potential deals that would be coming to someone. That is a critical element right now, and I see it as well with the investors that I'm talking with and working with, because there's so much change, and that comes with a lot of uncertainty. So the forward viability and doing pro forma projections on what the company in question, the deal you're looking at, could do, might do, with the competitive environment changing, maybe with the whole economic environment changing, with their particular opportunities in execution of AI and key agents in their business, you know, the partnerships that might be formed are really more in the area, the realm of the unknown than they are the known these days. So I think it's this dynamic, as you said, there's a tremendous amount of money waiting for a place to invest. And so the PE and VC firms have access to that money, but the deals that are coming forward that really make sense, that are kind of no-brainers, are fewer than you would expect during a time like this when there's a lot of money to be put in play. So yeah, very good insight. Very good insight. Well, I enjoyed the conversation, Richard, and I think the audience did as well. Before we go, let me ask you a couple of questions I always like to ask my guests. If you were a younger man, I mean, you're a pretty young man compared to some of us already, but let's say you go back 20 years and you think about where you were then, what advice would you give your younger self that you think would be really helpful in growing into kind of the leader you've become today?
Sure. Yeah, definitely more gray hairs than I'd like to admit. But um, I think probably the biggest thing when I look back, there's a phrase that I used a lot working with our teams that I think have resonated around. We kind of go to a big whiteboard. I've always been a big whiteboard guy. And just draw and put a plus sign in the letter Y, standing for kind of be positive but ask why. So my biggest thing is when you come in, it's consultants will also refer to it as the airport test. Nobody wants to be around the negative person. Like it zaps your energy. It makes it difficult. Like mine is assume positive intent, come in with a positive atmosphere, but at the same time ask why. So that's the why side of it. So be comfortable to ask if you don't understand something. And I think that's some of those. I was afraid to ask those questions. Well, why? Well, you take some things as fact. If you ask why, you'll learn something and kind of dig one layer deeper. I think that's something that I didn't really do for way too many is my experience because you're coming in with experts. It's a little bit intimidating, especially as a consultant. We would be going into the C-suite of large companies of, well, they would just take something, you would put notes like, well, he must be right. He's in a position of authority. You can always learn, I think, but you come in there, you assume the positive intent. But if you ask why, kick around and get a little bit of smarter on things, you'll be that much better for it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think just another way to say the same thing you just said is that by being positive, it gives you really the permission in a positive relationship to ask the question why. Because if you're negative and you ask the why, it has a completely different tone and meaning and implication, doesn't it?
Yep.
But if you say, "Yeah, geez, I really love that idea. Is that really, would it really be possible to do that? Let's think about it. Like why do you think that would work? And are there things that you think, or why do you think there might be difficulties in doing it?" Then it's like I'm with you. I'm trying to make something work, but I'm not shooting it down. I'm just making sure we're smart about the way we execute. So there's
Sure.
a lesson to be learned there for sure. Okay, so let's fast forward 20 years. You and I are having a beer talking about the meaning of life and all the things we've done in our lives and our careers. What are you going to be telling me? Let's just say after the first beer, not after the third one. What are you going to tell me you're most proud of?
Okay. We'll see where we are and how deep we were in at the time, I suppose.
Yeah.
No, I think the big is something I've gotten more comfortable with as I've gone through is make a mark. And that could be in a business or that could be in people. There's nothing more humbling than when you come to somebody that worked for you, with you, or even was your leader at the time that you felt like you've You've taught them something, you've learned something from them, and seeing them succeed and move over and create something successful somewhere else. Um, I love having those experiences, and those are probably the ones that I'm the most proud of. Um, and also, especially when you take a calculated risk. So whether you're leaning into the business, we're talking about, all right, let's leave the known home security market and go in the home automation market. But we made some calculations, we saw the opportunity, we chased it, and it benefited us. But the same thing, you can easily look at that as people. I think way too easily, especially if you're looking at the recruiting world today, like LinkedIn, like here's a million jobs. Well,
Right.
okay, well, what's the thing that how do you identify someone in a person and know that that's a capability, or like wow, that's something I see.
Yeah.
How do you invest in them, take a little bit of risk with them, and then see them be successful? Those are things probably the most I take the most pride in.
Yeah, well, I think you're ahead of the game there because I work with hundreds of executives who are very accomplished and wonderful people in many ways, but not all of them kind of understand that it's not about bringing in the project and hitting the bottom line and growing the business and all those things. That's critically important. That's what we do. We get we're hired to make those things happen. But at the end of the day, the ones who have actually been around the block a few times see that the only thing that really matters is how we touch other people in a positive way along the way. And doing that actually will accelerate the results at the same time. So,
Mhm.
I'm really proud of the fact that, at your kind of relatively young age as a CEO leader, you're already on the fact that people relationships are important, touching other people's lives and what you can do together and bring things to bear together on will make a big difference. I see it in my coaching all the time. I emphasize it in my coaching because I've been through that corporate journey. And now when I get a phone call from some of the people I used to work with, and we talk about old times, we talk about the things that were really important. I just really can't tell you how valuable those things are as compared to the trophies that we won or the awards that we won. Those are nice, but those are in the garage right
Mhm.
now. But the phone calls, when they come in, those are in my heart, and I think you recognize that, and that'll take you a long way in any and everything you do, and it's fulfilling as well. I mean, it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also the fulfilling thing to do. So, Richard, if anyone in our audience wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Sure. So my LinkedIn is up to date, probably the easiest way to keep touch. I'm building in right now as I'm transitioning into the next, I'll be moving in my next portfolio company. Like we were talking about, that's one of those things. If you build on your experience, you pivot to what comes next.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've seen is already it's talking to people that you've worked in the past. Like, all right, now I know how to build that network on the future. So please, if you're listening to this and something resonates with you, have a question or something like to work on together, hit me up on LinkedIn. Glad to have a conversation anytime.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's been really wonderful having you on the program. I enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure the audience did as well. I wish you all the best in any and everything you decide to do. I'm sure you're going to be doing great things going forward, just like you've done in the past. So thanks for being here, and I look forward to staying in touch, Richard.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Wayne.
Well, that's it for Driven to Lead today. We really appreciate you being with us. Share this with a friend or a business colleague if you would. And if I could remind you again, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We're very grateful for that. So until next time, always remember the high road leads to a better place.